Hello, advocates, and welcome to another regional interview. Today, my name is Rhonda Otteson, and I'm Executive Director with the Minnesota Coalition for the Homeless. And I want to welcome Commissioner Chris LaTondresse from Hennepin County with us today for another regional interview. Thank you, Commissioner, for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Glad to be here.
So, as a Hennepin County Commissioner, why does unsheltered homelessness matter to you?
Yeah, well, just a little bit of my background. So Chris LaTondresse, Hennepin County Commissioner representing District 6, which is a lot of the western suburbs of the Twin Cities. So it's Hopkins, Edina, Minnetonka, Northern Eden Prairie, and roughly a dozen communities around Lake Minnetonka. In my current role as Hennepin County Commissioner, I'm also chair of our HRA, that's our Housing and Redevelopment Authority. And I'm one of our board representatives on Heading Home Hennepin, which is our county's homelessness initiative in coordination with several other entities. And I just have to say that, for me, this topic is personal. I grew up, I'm sitting in Hopkins right now, the town I grew up in, the town I'm raising my family in. But my parents took 4 years away from their careers when I was growing up for some international compassion work abroad. And when our family got home, my dad didn't have a job, and we needed affordable housing to get back in the Hopkins school district and back on our feet. And I know a lot of families are in the same position. They were before this pandemic. They're even more so now. And when a family experiences that, our gaps in affordable housing quickly turn into our unsheltered homelessness crisis. And so while I haven't experienced homelessness myself, I have been at that end of the spectrum where our family was housing vulnerable. And I would say that this issue of housing affordability in the intersections with unsheltered homelessness might be the single most important issue that we face right now as a state and as a region. And I'm not just saying that because I'm having this conversation with you and with housing advocates. I'd say in my former role, actually before becoming Hennepin County Commissioner, I was vice chair of the Hopkins School Board. And our data showed that the single greatest predictor of student success was housing stability. My wife, Ashley, is a nurse practitioner at Hennepin Healthcare. And believe me, with that being our reality, we feel the weight of the pandemic and its impact on residents and families every single day. And a lot of her patients just straight up didn't have places to live before the pandemic, and now even more so, that's been exacerbated. And she tells me that more than any medicine that she and her colleagues can offer, when her team is able to get housing for those patients, it changes their whole course. So I often tell people, like, listen, if you care about student success, if you care about health outcomes, you care about this issue, this intersecting issue of unsheltered homelessness and housing affordability, whether you realize it or not. And that work runs straight through Hennepin County, and it starts with, I believe, prioritizing our most vulnerable residents.
Yeah, now more than ever, housing is healthcare, right?
Absolutely.
Over and over again.
And homework starts with home is another adjacent concept.
Yeah, so true. So tell me about a few of the steps you've been taking to address unsheltered homelessness.
I think for me, it starts just with a few foundational principles that inform my work as a commissioner, but also as chair of our HRA and my work on Heading Home Hennepin. And number one, it's this notion that the best way to end homelessness is to prevent it from happening in the first place. That we have a homelessness crisis because we have an affordable housing crisis. So we need more resources from the state, from the federal government, and we need to make more resources available to the county, yes, to address this immediate crisis of unsheltered homelessness, but we absolutely have to go upstream. And that goes to my second point, and it's this: housing costs money, costs a lot of money, but it's way less expensive than homelessness. And I'm speaking about about the county specifically here. So, for example, caring for our community members that show up at HCMC with a health crisis, or our shelter system, detox, jail, not to mention the public safety impacts. And the bottom line I'd want to make here is that crisis is expensive. Crisis is always expensive. It takes a huge toll on our residents when they experience this kind of crisis, but it's also very expensive. It puts huge stress on state government budgets, county governments. And we need these safety nets, but a better return on our investment is to make these investments upstream to make sure that people don't experience homelessness to begin with. And the final point I'd make is that housing instability, unsheltered homelessness, it doesn't only harm those of us who are housing insecure, it hurts our whole community. In fact, I believe that one of the biggest threats to the future prosperity of our region is the lack of affordable housing. And I talk to business leaders, they tell me that Minneapolis is never going to get back to business as usual until we address this challenge of homeless encampments and the long-term challenge of affordable housing. It hurts our students, it affects our public health, it hurts our workforce, and it will affect our future prosperity. But, I mean, yes, it is about money, but it really comes down to a choice about whether we will settle for a future where permanent encampments are a feature of our community, and where families who work full time are still just one paycheck away from losing their homes, or are we going to make these investments to ensure folks have a place to live, and that these, we're going to spend the money either way. Are we going to spend it in a way that provides our families and residents with dignified housing that sets them up for success in every area of their life? Or are we going to spend these dollars in crisis mode?
Yeah, I think you hit on a lot of really important points. Prevention is key. Addressing unsheltered homelessness is expensive. It's also life-saving. And so those investments all across the board, and then housing's a solution. We want everybody to be housed. So, when you think about one thing you could share with advocates, what would you say?
I think that the most important message I'd have you take away today is that your voice is important and your advocacy matters. I say this as an elected leader who's both in this role as commissioner, before that was a school board member. I also say this as somebody whose actual background in public service. I've spent some time in government. More of my time has actually been working in or even leading and organizing advocacy movements to push government in the direction of our priorities and values. So actually, yeah, I'm an elected leader, but I think about this work as an advocate. And I will tell you that I'm thinking, I'm more than likely, since we're even having this conversation, I share your values, I share your priorities on this. But our ability, my ability to act as an individual leader is limited by the votes that 6 other commissioners are going to make. If we put this in the state context, our ability to affect policy and budget is impacted not just by individual leaders that share your priorities, but by other leaders that are making decisions. And so I often tell our advocacy community, like, we need you as elected leaders. We need you to organize, to fight, to build relationships, especially with those that disagree with you on this, or at least have serious questions, because your advocacy creates the context where we are actually able to drive changes in policy and budget. Again, I'm just one vote, I'm just one leader, but when there's this groundswell of advocacy around an issue, particularly if it comes from constituents in the community of these electeds, it makes a difference. It at least gives them something to think about and gives them a run for their money. So I think that'd be my biggest message is sometimes, whether it's signing a petition, making a phone call, sending a postcard, in a non-pandemic context, going to the Capitol, you might wonder, gosh, is my advocacy actually making a difference here? I can tell you it absolutely makes a difference. So keep it up.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that vote of confidence, I suppose, for all of our advocates and those who listen to these regional interviews, and bringing your insights. We're excited to keep pushing and advocating for an agenda that makes those investments in shelter and housing. So thank you, Commissioner, for taking time today to share your thoughts.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. To be continued.